Picture this. You're a dog tied to a moving cart. The cart is headed somewhere specific, and you can't change its destination. But here's the thing. You have a choice. You can run alongside it willingly, or you can fight it and be dragged. Either way, the cart moves forward. This ancient Stoic metaphor might just change how you think about every decision you make today. Welcome to Spark and Hustle. I'm your host, Puneet Kaur, and over the next few minutes, we're going to explore one of the most misunderstood concepts in philosophy, free will, and how understanding it properly can transform your relationship with stress, anxiety, and control. Let me ask you something. How much of your day do you spend fighting against reality? And I don't mean the big philosophical questions. I mean the small stuff. The traffic that makes you late, the email that ruins your morning, the weather that cancels your plans, the person who doesn't text you back, the promotion that goes to someone else. We spend enormous amounts of mental and emotional energy resisting what already is. We argue with reality. We petition the universe for a do-over. And here's the kicker. Reality never listens. The cart keeps moving. The ancient Stoics understood something that modern psychology is only now confirming through research. The gap between what we can control and what we can't control is where most human suffering lives. A fascinating study from Stanford University Psychology Department, led by researchers examining stress and control, found that people who have a clear understanding of what they can and cannot control report significantly lower levels of anxiety and depression. The study showed that perceived control, even when actual control is limited, dramatically affects our stress and response and overall well-being. But here's where the Stoics were brilliant. They didn't just tell you to accept things you can't control. They gave you a framework for understanding what free will actually means and where your real power lies. And that framework starts with the dog in a cart. This metaphor came from the Stoic philosophers, likely originating with Zeno of Citium and founder of Stoicism, though it was elaborated on by later Stoics like Epictetus. It's not about giving up or being passive. It's about understanding the nature of reality so clearly that you stop wasting energy on battles you cannot win and instead direct all your power toward the battles you can. Today, we're going to break down this metaphor piece by piece. We'll explore what the cart represents, what it means to be tied to it, and most importantly, what real freedom looks like when you understand the game you're actually playing. By the end of this episode, you'll have a completely different framework for thinking about control, choice, and the life you're building. So let's start with the cart itself. What does this cart represent in your actual life? This cart is everything external to your mind, everything that happens outside your conscious choice. It's the family you were born into, the country you live in, the color of your skin, the genetic predispositions, the actions of other people, natural disasters, economic recessions, pandemics, your boss's mood, the traffic, the weather, and ultimately the fact that you and everyone you love will die. I know that sounds heavy right out the gate, but stay with me. The Stoics weren't pessimists, they were realists. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most famous Stoic philosophers who also happened to be the emperor of Rome, would start each day reminding himself of these facts. He'd tell himself, "Today I will meet people who are interfering, ungracious, insolent, and selfish. They are like this because they don't know good from bad." Was he being negative? No, he was preparing himself for reality. He was acknowledging the cart's direction. Think about your own life right now. How many things are you stressed about that you literally cannot control? Maybe it's your partner's behavior. Maybe it's what your parents think of your career choices. Maybe it's whether you'll get the job you interviewed for. Maybe it's the economy or politics or someone said about you behind your back. Here's what the hard truth looks like. You're tied to a cart that's moving in a certain direction, and that direction is determined by forces far beyond your individual will. The cart doesn't care about your preferences. It doesn't care that you worked hard. It doesn't care that you're a good person. The cart just moves. Now, I can hear some of you pushing back right now. Wait, Puneet, are you saying we have no control over our lives, that we should just give up and accept whatever happens? No, that's not what I'm saying at all. And that's not what the Stoics said either. This is where people misunderstand Stoicism and confuse it with fatalism. Fatalism says everything is predetermined, so nothing I do matters. I might as well not try. Stoicism says something radically different. Many things are predispositioned and predetermined or beyond my control. But my response to those things is entirely within my control, and that's where all my power lives. The difference is everything. Let me give you a modern example. You're stuck in traffic, you're going to be late for an afternoon meeting. The traffic, that's the cart. It's moving slowly, and you can't change that. You didn't cause the accident up ahead. You can't make the other cars disappear. The traffic is what it is. Now you have two choices. You can rage against it. You can honk your horn, scream, hit your steering wheel, spiral into anxiety about all the consequences of being late, create stories in your head about how this ruins everything that is being dragged by the cart. You're fighting reality. The reality is winning. Reality always wins. Or here's where free will actually exists. You can accept the traffic as a fact of this moment, call ahead to let people know you'll be late, put on a podcast or some music you enjoy, use the time to think or breathe, and arrive at your destination calm instead of frazzled. That's running alongside the cart. You're accepting what is or choosing your response. The traffic is same in both scenarios. The outcome, being late, is also the same, but your experience is completely different. And over time, the difference compounds into either a life of constant resistance and suffering or a life of acceptance and peace. A research team at Harvard Medical School studied the psychological effect of acceptance versus resistance in stressful situations. They found that people who practiced acceptance-based coping mechanisms showed lower cortisol levels, reduced blood pressure, and better overall health outcomes compared to those who engaged in resistance-based coping. Your body literally benefits when you stop fighting the cart. But acceptance isn't resignation. This is crucial. The Stoics weren't passive. Marcus Aurelius didn't say, well, the empire is falling, but that's just the cart's direction, so I'll do nothing. He worked tirelessly to improve Rome. Epictetus, who was born a slave, didn't just accept slavery as inevitable. He taught philosophy and influenced thousands. The Stoics were some of the most active, engaged people in history. The difference is they didn't confuse action with control. They acted on what they could influence while accepting what they couldn't change. They pushed the cart forward where they could, but they didn't pretend they were steering it when they weren't. Now, the second one. Now we're going to talk about the rope, the connection between you and the cart. This is where things get really interesting because the rope represents something we rarely examine, which is our attachment to specific outcomes. You're tied to the cart, you can't untie yourself, but here's what you can do. You can change your relationship with being tied to it. Most of us go through life thinking we're separate from the cart. We think we're supposed to be steering it, or that we should be able to stop it when we want. And when we can't, we suffer. We feel like failures. We feel powerless. We feel angry at the universe. But the Stoics would say you were never separate from the cart. You were always part of the system. The suffering comes from the illusion that you're supposed to be controlling things you were never designed to control. So if we think about an example of a business owner, right? They start the business. They were absolutely convinced that it would succeed. They did the research, put in the work, made all the right moves. If they were attached to the outcome and they just weren't hoping for success, but needing it, counting on it, building their whole identity around it, that's where the issue becomes. The business fails and they are devastated. Now they feel like the universe has betrayed them. They had done everything right. So why didn't the result show up as success? And the entrepreneur probably think that's what they deserved. Looking back through the Stoic lens, we can see what happened, right? They were trying to control the cart. Just because through their effort, their intelligence, their work ethic, they would think the reality would be what they wanted. But the cart doesn't work that way. There were 1,000 variables that entrepreneur couldn't control. Market timing, competitor actions, economic conditions, random chance. So they controlled their effort, and I'm sure they did, but they couldn't control the outcome. They were being dragged by the cart because they refused to accept the outcome wasn't fully in their hands. So you had to tie your whole identity, your peace, your self-worth to something external, then the consequences are you're going to lose in the long run. So you cannot fall apart when the word doesn't cooperate. So the Stoic approach would have been completely different. A Stoic would say, I'm going to put in my maximum effort. I'm going to do everything within my power to make this succeed. But I'm not attached to the outcome. I'm attached to the process, to showing up with my excellence, to showing up with integrity, with focus. If it succeeds, great. If it fails, I'll learn and move forward. Either way, my worth isn't determined by the results I can't fully control. So research from Yale's University Psychology Department has shown that people who can separate their self-worth from external outcomes have significantly higher resilience and lower rates of anxiety and depression. The study found that outcome independence, the ability to find meaning and value in effort rather than results, is one of the strongest predictors of long-term well-being and success. Now, ask yourself, how much of the outcome is really actually within your control when you're thinking about a specific job, a certain amount of money, finding a romantic partner, having your parents approve of you? You can control whether you study, but not whether you get accepted. You can control the quality of your job application, but not whether you're hired. You can control your work ethic, but not whether you get promoted. You can control being a good partner, but not whether someone chooses to love you. You can control being a good parent, but not every choice your adult children make. The rope is your connection to all these outcomes. And then the question is, are you going to let every external result drag you around emotionally? Or are you going to focus on what you can actually control, which is your effort, your attitude, your integrity, your growth, and be not so attached to the outcomes and let them what they are. This doesn't mean you don't care about your outcomes. Of course you care. We all care deeply about our outcomes. But what we can't do is let our peace depend on getting outcomes that we want. We should find peace in the process, in the effort, and in living according to our values, regardless of the results. That's running alongside the cart. That's freedom. So if the cart is moving and we're tied to it, where does free will actually exist? That is the most important part of the entire metaphor. Your free will lives in exactly one place. That is your response to what happens. Not in controlling what happens, not in forcing outcomes, not in making other people behave differently, not in stopping the cart or changing its direction. Your freedom lives in how you choose to relate to reality. Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher who was born into slavery, put it this way: We cannot choose our external circumstances, but we can always choose how we respond to them. Think about that. He was literally enslaved. He had almost no external freedom. He couldn't leave when he wanted. He couldn't pursue his own interests. He was, in the most literal sense, tied to the cart he couldn't choose or didn't choose. And yet he remembered as one of the freest human beings who have ever lived. Why? Because he understood what real freedom means and where it exists. Real freedom is an absence of constraints. Real freedom is choosing your response to constraints. You're stuck in traffic, you can choose frustration or acceptance. Someone criticizes you, you can choose defensiveness or curiosity. You don't get the job, you can choose bitterness or growth. Your partner disappoints you, you can choose resentment or understanding. You face a setback, you can choose to see failure or learning. In every single moment, the cart is moving in a direction. And in every single moment, you get to choose whether you're running alongside it or being dragged. The Stoic practice is to create space between stimulus and response. One of my favorite books that I've recommended in previous podcasts is by the psychiatrist Viktor Frankl, who also is a Holocaust survivor who was heavily influenced by Stoic philosophy. One of his quotes he wrote in his book is, between stimulus and response, there is space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Creating that space between that stimulus and response is the work. That's where your free will gets exercised, not in controlling traffic, but in choosing how you respond to it, not controlling other people's behavior, but in choosing how you respond to it. Not in controlling whether you succeed or fail, but in choosing how you respond to success or failure. Let me give you a framework for this that I found incredibly useful. When something happens that you don't like, ask yourself 3 questions. First, is this within my control? If yes, take action. Don't complain, don't ruminate, don't worry, just act. You control your effort, your attitude, your words, your actions. If something is genuinely within your control and it matters to you, then you do something about it right now. Second question, if it's not within my control, can I influence it? Maybe you can't control whether you get hired, but you can influence it by submitting a great application. Maybe you can't control your partner's mood, but you can influence the environment by being kind. Influence what you can, but don't confuse influence with control. You don't get to determine the outcome. Third question, if I can't control it and can't meaningfully influence it, can I accept it? That's where most of your peace will come from. Most things in life fall into this category. The weather, other people's opinions, the past, the economy, aging, death. These are all facts of reality. You can either accept them and find peace or resist them and suffer. The cart is moving either way. So overall, this is what the dog and the cart teaches us. The cart represents all things you don't control. The rope represents your connection to the outcomes and circumstances, and your choice, your only real choice, is whether you're going to run alongside the cart with acceptance and intention or be dragged by it with resistance and suffering. Most people spend their entire lives being dragged. They fight the reality at every turn. They demand the world be different than it is. They attach their happiness to outcomes they can't control. And then they wonder why they're exhausted, anxious, and unfulfilled. The Stoic way is different. It says, look clearly at what you can control. Your thoughts, your responses, your effort, your character. Pour all your energy into that and everyone else. Let it be what it is. The cart is moving. You can run alongside it with grace or be dragged. The choice is yours. And it's only choice that actually matters. Here's a book recommendation. If you want to dive into this concept of control and Stoic philosophy, I cannot recommend highly enough the book, The Obstacle is the Way. It's actually one of my most gifted books. It's written by Ryan Holiday. He's one of the modern world's best interpreters of Stoic philosophy, and this book specifically deals with how to respond to things we can't control. I discovered it early into my career, and I've benefited from rereading it every time I hit a roadblock. So he breaks down how historical figures from Marcus Aurelius to Theodore Roosevelt to Steve Jobs and Stoic principles to transform obstacles into opportunities. What I also love about this book is it's insanely practical. It's not abstract philosophy. It's a handbook for action. So he breaks it down into 3 disciplines: perception, how you see things; action, what you do about them; and will, how you handle what you can't change. These 3 components map perfectly onto the dog and the cart metaphor we've been discussing. So it has some real stories. You'll really enjoy the book. And it's only 200 pages, easy read. And honestly, it's one of those books you'll return to again and again when you're facing challenges. So 2 powerful quotes from this book that I want to share with you. The first one is, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." That's my favorite part. What stands in the way becomes the way. That's the essence of Stoic thinking. So the obstacle isn't something separate from your path. It is the path. The traffic isn't interrupting your peace. It is the opportunity to practice peace. The criticism isn't blocking your growth. It is the mechanism of your growth. The failure isn't preventing your success. It is teaching you how to succeed. And then the second one is, we decide what we will make of each and every situation. We decide whether we'll break or whether we'll resist. We decide whether we'll assent or reject. No one can force us to give up or believe something that is untrue. Our perceptions are the thing that we're in complete control of. This is it. This is where your freedom lies. Not in forcing outcomes, but in choosing your perception of the outcomes. Not in making life give you what you want, but in deciding how you'll respond when it doesn't. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. And the key takeaway I hope that you gain from today's episode is, you're going to face circumstances you don't like. You're going to move in directions you didn't choose. People are going to disappoint you. Plans are going to fall apart. Things you work hard for won't always work out. That's not a flaw in the universe. That's just reality. That's cart being cart. And your power is in choosing how you respond, where the cart goes. And that choice, that single choice that you make thousands of times a day, determines the quality of your entire life. Thank you for listening to Spark and Hustle. If this episode resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And stay bold, stay soft, and keep going.